Hi, everyone. Welcome to the new Age of SEO webinar with Matt and myself.
Hello.
We're excited to chat with you today about how SEO has changed and talk through really some of the fundamental pieces on how your SEO strategy really should be reflected in some of the changes over the past few years. And then we'll jump into reviews of a few sites that you all have submitted. Thank you for doing so. And if we have time at the end, we will gladly answer any questions that you may have if you want to maybe ask anything about your own site or just any questions you have about how SEO has changed. So before we begin, we'll jump in and I'll let Matt introduce himself.
Sure. So I'm Matthew Barby, and I am the Director of Acquisition Marketing here at HubSpot. Been at HubSpot now for around about coming close-ish to 3 years now. A lot of my time initially was spent focused primarily around SEO and now spanned across wider acquisition. And I've been part of the team that's been focused on helping deliver more value to our customers through our content strategy tool and some of the fundamental frameworks and ideas behind its development as well.
Awesome. And I am Jeffrey Vocell. I am a product marketing manager here at HubSpot. I've been here at HubSpot for just about the same time. We weren't quite in the same starting class, but I think we must have been close.
Just missed.
Exactly. Because I've been here just about 3 years. So I've worked on a lot of tools. So Matt mentioned the content strategy tool. So we'll talk about that a little bit more throughout this webinar. But fundamentally work with the product team and a lot of you on the other end of this to help you refine your own SEO strategy using this tool as well. So with that said, let's just jump in. We'd love to talk.
It's just worth mentioning as well, if anybody does want to chat and ask questions, if you're viewing this on the landing page, just hit the YouTube icon, should pop out the screen, and you can ask and leave any questions in the little chat pane. We'll do our best to answer those questions. As long as they're not too difficult, then we'll ignore them and pretend they never existed, right?
So. Totally. Cool. So Matt, you're obviously a well-renowned expert here, and would love to an overview of how you think just SEO has changed over the past 2 years, from maybe an algorithm perspective. How has the algorithm shifted as marketers think about creating content? We always want to create more content, and we always are chasing after that elusive kind of rank for our content. So
right.
We'd love maybe a broad overview of how you think of SEO and how it's changed over the past few years.
Sure. I'm allegedly an expert, by the way, yet to be proven. So one of the things that I've talked a lot about in different talks I've done, and if anyone's read anything that I've written in the past year or so, one of the things that I am put a lot of emphasis on is the fact that we talk a lot about how Google has changed and all of the big algorithm updates that have happened over the past few years. And yes, there has been a ton of changes specifically related to the algorithms. We go back to, I think it was 2012, 2013, when the big Penguin update happened. And what that was all primarily focused on was targeting malicious or spam linking, things that were falling outside of Google's webmaster guidelines. We had the Panda update that came through, focusing a bit more around thin content duplication. And we've had Hummingbird that's focused more on the localized search queries, and a number of others with the introduction of RankBrain, which we'll kind of come on to. But honestly, one of the things more than anything has been the searcher itself. And we've seen this a lot at HubSpot, right?
Oh, yeah.
Is that actually the way that people are searching has changed. And I think one of the things that highlights this the most is something that we've talked about in the past around searching for local restaurants and things like that. And you go back to, say, 2012, arbitrary year, right? And let's say you were Jeff's looking over my shoulder as I'm searching for a lunch place that we're going to go for lunch on today. And he sees that I'm typing into Google, where's the best place to go for lunch right now? You're probably going to think that's a pretty bizarre thing for me to do because I'm speaking to Google like it's a person, and it's not, right? Back then we would be okay, lunch place Boston, or even more specific, Asian restaurant, Boston.
Yeah.
And this is the big fundamental difference now, is that Google has invested so much into natural language processing, understanding like the implicit layers of a query that's being searched. So what I mean by that is the things that you aren't necessarily explicitly stating, i.e. restaurant, Boston, but actually the things that are implied by the conditions surrounding when you search. So right now, when I search for where's the best place to eat right now, Google knows a few things. First of all, where am I when I'm doing that search query?
Right.
So it can take from our IP address or the general location where we are. So we're in Boston right now. So it's basically appended that to the query. What device am I searching from? Am I searching via cellular data, Wi-Fi? Am I on a mobile device, desktop? That changes things. That means I either need walking distance if I'm on a cell phone. Desktop, it may mean, okay, maybe you're looking for something a little later on. So it's going to show me different results. And I think with the introduction of things like voice search as well, that's changing everything, because you don't go, hey, Alexa, Boston restaurant, right? Like it's much more conversational, and that's really changed the way that people feel more comfortable searching that way. So kind of taking this all the way back to what you were mentioning at the start, Jeff, is like really it's less from a marketer's point of view about the search engines themselves changing the rules, and more about the searchers themselves, both changing the way they search and feeling more comfortable that they're going to get the results they need from those searches. And Google have invested just most of their time in actually understanding what people are searching for, rather than necessarily understanding content like on a deeper level, which of course they're doing. But like, this is where the most benefit has come from a search perspective and a searcher perspective, but also at the same time has created the biggest challenge from an SEO point of view as well.
Right, exactly. Yeah, that's a great overview, I think, of how everything has changed. I think from a marketer's point of view, for all you really watching, one way of thinking about how this like shift in conversational search has kind of materialized is, even when you write content today, you likely maybe do a little bit of keyword research to start with. And that goes back to what Matt was saying in kind of the era of that search of like maybe restaurants Boston or lunch spot Boston or whatever the case may be. And today with that really more intent-based search, it's really, really difficult to nail down that keyword. And it's not to say keywords aren't important; they still are massively important, right?
Yeah,
but
for sure.
But at the same time, like that behavior has changed. So as marketers, our kind of content creation process needs to evolve with it.
So we're not going to say keywords are dead.
No, we're not going to say keywords are dead. They are not dead.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. Is I think people get quite wound up, especially within SEO in particular, is around really process. Things like keyword research is a fundamental part of the process within SEO, and typically some of the best SEOs that I've ever worked with in the past have had very solid ways of being able to think about how they go about keyword research, and honestly, a lot of this focuses on being able to take a step back and focus less on just tons of like granular layers to this process and like finding those exact phrases that you're going to go after and create content around. Yeah, okay, like that's fine. But what you want to understand here is like the whole core topics that you need to be focused on owning a piece of. And when we're talking previously around the different way people are searching, based on the same search query, the same words, right? Yeah. Like you searching over in San Francisco, me searching for the exact same words in Boston, delivering completely different results. And this is where thinking about things on a purely just keyword by keyword basis really doesn't cut it right now. There are always going to be times when you want to still look at that level, but it outside of local SEO as well, it's still incredibly important.
Right. Yeah. It feels like if you're focused solely on keywords today, again, and while they're massively important, if you are so focused solely on that you may be potentially missing some opportunity based off the way different people search using conversational terms.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So you briefly mentioned topics and focusing a lot around topics. Can you walk us through that model a little bit and kind of what that looks like and how it should be kind of executed in our SEO strategy today?
Sure. So at HubSpot in particular, we are a content powerhouse. I think we must produce more content than any other B2B business that's around, especially in the software space. And we have a pretty wide net that we would cast in terms of what we talk about. But one of the things that we also have going for us is the fact that organic search is such an important part of everything that we do. It's our largest driver of traffic. It's pretty much what's built HubSpot to what it is today. And when we think about developing a content strategy as a whole and how we've thought about this in particular with a laser focus in the past couple of years, has all been focused around understanding the core topics that we need to create content around. So from a more process point of view, just to take a step back before I get too in the weeds of that, is this all kind of comes back to like the basic parts of understanding your persona, the specific problems that people have related to your persona, and figuring out how you're going to solve those problems. This is ultimately what pretty much all top of the funnel content tries to do.
Yeah.
It's one of the primary reasons why any website would create a blog, right? It's like you're focused on creating a piece of content that solves a very specific problem.
Right.
And then the need for that problem to be solved is illustrated in demand for search around those topics. So instead of us tracking the keyword rankings of like 10 million keywords that we have content showing up for, which is both a painful and unmanageable process that ultimately doesn't deliver a whole lot of value to us from an analytical point of view, we focus more on thinking about like our sphere of influence within a specific topic. So let's take the topic of inbound marketing, right? Like very broad topic, and we probably have subtopics within that. But our whole focus from a content point of view is how do we own and be everywhere possible within this topic of inbound marketing? And the way we tend to do that is say, okay, we need like a canonical resource that's really focused all about inbound marketing. We call that a pillar page. Lots of different people will have different names for these, but basically an all-encompassing, very general overview guide for this specific topic. Then what we try to do is say, okay, let's name every single question possible that someone may have related to this like core topic of inbound marketing. And that's really what branches off all of these different individual pieces of smaller content that we then create. And another thing tangentially related to this as well is you've probably seen yourself, most of you guys watching right now have seen this. Whenever you're actually searching for any keyword really that starts with how, what, when, where, you're probably seeing over the past couple of years some changes in the search results page. Featured snippets are showing more and more. You may know these as quick answer boxes, where Google is displaying content directly within the search engines. And we're seeing this actually across so many things. You're able to book hotels within the search results. They're showing the whole job listing section within Google Jobs now, and more and more and more of this. But what the point I'm trying to make is that these featured snippet areas are almost becoming an extension of content now. And we've been doing a lot of testing actually ourselves with featured snippets on the HubSpot blog to try and rank more within these, which is probably a whole separate webinar in itself. But being able to be laser focused and answering one question at a time with one piece of content at a time, and then giving people a journey that connects them back into this core pillar page via some kind of link, right? So like go and read more about this topic. What we're doing is creating a really strong architecture of all these individual topics that are being talked about that all pull people back into this one overarching piece. Now, when you think about that from a typical inbound marketing point of view, it's really nice because this one piece can be super focused on conversion, driving all of this demand from all of this search queries that are coming through into these broad topics. From there, channeling them into one central point that you can really optimize, and then eventually bring through and convert them into leads or customers, however we want to actually manage that.
Interesting. Okay. So for a lot of marketers on the webinar right now, you all probably have a lot of existing content, or maybe some existing content that you've probably written based off keywords that you've researched and individual kind of tactics or pain points you've identified, maybe I should say, with your potential buyers. Like, how do we transition from that keyword-based model that people are already using and maybe already have content on into this new topic-driven model?
Yeah, I think that's a good question, because what I'm not saying is tear down everything you've done, start again. You are free to do that, but there is a disclaimer that you'll probably lose everything. Now, what I would say here is that I don't even think that we need to necessarily look at it as like two polar ends of the scale, being like topic focused, being keyword focused. This is almost like a stack, right? So you're looking on a very granular query level, on like the keyword level. And in all honesty, like when you're looking on a keyword level, you're probably still focused a bit around specific questions people have. And then you've got kind of like the next layer up in the stack is this topic level. And the easiest way to keep focus to keyword research and generally building out an editorial calendar and thinking about the holes in your current content strategy, and also your existing content, where that sits from an architecture point of view and how it fits into the long-term plan, is just to begin like taking what you already have, whether it's on a bunch of keywords that you've researched or whether it's a ton of content that focuses around certain things, is grouping and labeling those into specific like overarching topics. And this is something that we actually went through the whole process of this summer, which you're a big part of as well, Jeff, was like taking all of our existing content, tens of thousands of pieces of content, and basically labeling and assigning topic groups to all of these different areas, so that what we could do is eventually, when we've done that process, take a step back and say, okay, these are the topic clusters, and that's the label that we give to a group of pages that all have been created and focused around one core topic. Which of the topic clusters tend to perform really, really well in terms of organic traffic, which perform really well in terms of conversions, in terms of leads, which actually seem like they could perform well, but we don't generate a whole lot of traffic because maybe we only have like one or two pieces of content in that area. And what we're trying to figure out is, where are the holes, right? So if we've only really covered, say, 3 or 4% of the total search demand, i.e. we're only really catered towards a small portion of what people are talking about in that topic, we want to create more and fill out that topic cluster with more and more content so that we kind of like increase our sphere of influence around that topic. If we've got one topic cluster that's kind of, we've pushed like 50% of all our content into, we're completely saturated, and there just isn't a huge amount of extra demand around that, we don't need to keep piling the same stuff into there. It's incredibly inefficient. And I think one of the key focuses for anyone that's focused around content creation from an SEO point of view is being as efficient as possible.
Yeah.
Like just churning out the same stuff that's kind of having such an overlap that you're cannibalizing your own appearance in the search engines is incredibly inefficient and a waste of like your resources. And being able to identify those gaps that you can go and take advantage of really quickly, get some quick wins, start building out more topical relevance across your website. Another really important thing from Google's point of view, making sure that all of the internal linking that's happening within your content is happening between individual pages related to the same topic cluster. So you're kind of creating these like structures within your site that are very driven around individual topics. That's going to help you rank much better for these topics that you're going after. And from a measurement point of view, look, this is like so much better because not all of the content you create necessarily on its own, judging a single piece, is going to be able to be comparable from a traffic point of view from one to the other.
Great.
But it has a ton of other value, whether it generates links that can then help boost the authority of other pieces of content on the site, be able to just essentially solve a much smaller problem, but still an existing problem that can help you capture more of the questions going on around that topic as well. So I think this is more about like building in the infrastructure and then having a much more effective and efficient plan moving forward based off of it.
Okay. Yeah, that's awesome. And I think one of the important things, and we'll show an example of this and in our own HubSpot research report, which you can now see on our screen here, where this is really the model that Matt has been talking about of topic clusters. So at the center, you have really that pillar content or that pillar page, which is the foundational resource for everything to do with that topic. And I don't think we need to spend a ton of time on maybe the pillar content, but I think one of the important things here to define is that that pillar piece of content is fundamentally ungated. It needs to be available for search crawlers to be able to not only just find, but also kind of index and read fully, right?
Right, and you want to give people a good experience. You're telling people to come through to this thing to learn more. Like, they should be able to access that information and learn more.
Totally. People expect more nowadays when they're searching. In the past, it may have been really easy to maybe search for something, land on a page where you would fill out a form. Today, that same experience, to some extent, doesn't work as well. In certain industries, it may, but today, really, the pillar content works wonders. Yeah. I think one other piece that's worth talking through here is really this internal linking strategy. Here at HubSpot, we've seen just massive success from linking numerous blog posts up to kind of a core pillar piece of content. Can you talk through that, like internal linking, just for a minute or two?
Yeah, for sure. I think the thing to backlinks in general, it can be a pretty mysterious aspect of SEO for a lot of people, and it's notoriously generating links from external websites is typically one of the toughest parts of SEO. But one thing to always understand is that whether it's a link from an external website or whether it's a link from your own web page content within your own website, they still hold the same kind of way of being evaluated from terms of authority. You want to make sure that the pages that are related to one another on a topical level are being linked to one another. Like, internal linking is an incredibly important part of any website's SEO. And a lot of, especially on larger websites, some of the biggest wins that you'll gain is through internal linking and architecture restructuring. And that can sound scarier than it needs to be. But honestly, it's just a case of making sure that you're sending, on the most basic level, making sure that you're sending the most internal links to the most important content across your site. Right. The pages on your website that are linked to the most, you're saying to Google, these are the most important pages on our website, right? And you're pushing the most authority into them. It's like you say, okay, these are like the superstars on my team that I want everyone to see and be judged on. And that's the way that you want to think about internal linking on the most like fundamental level. Not thinking about it is kind of like just having a ton of authority just pulled up that you're just kind of like, well, we'll just leave there and siphon that into the wrong thing. Like, you don't want the guys that are sitting on the bench being thrown into the superstar position, right? And that's what you can be doing right now with putting tons of internal links, sometimes unknowingly, to the pieces of content that really should never be at the top of your priority list.
Right. Yeah, you really need to think through your internal linking strategy. It shouldn't just be kind of an on-the-whim type of decision. It really needs to be thoughtful and how you link up to that pillar content or that really superstar content, essentially.
All right, for sure. We'll also share out links to these pieces of content as well at the end, right?
Yeah, we will. We will share a link to that research report that we were just showing at the end of this as well. So if you want to check that out, if you want to read more about this new strategy and some of the success we've seen here at HubSpot from it, I would recommend checking that out.
Great.
With that said, we'd love to move into a few of the sites that were submitted, and walk through and try to help a few people out.
And tear them to pieces. No, I'm joking. Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect. So this first one was submitted by Stefan. It's a company named Yachtiko, I believe.
I'm glad that you said that, because I was unsure of how to say it myself.
Stefan, if I mispronounce that, I sincerely apologize. Feel free to let me know on Twitter. And Stefan's company is primarily aimed at attracting kind of moderately affluent, I would say, customers. They do kind of yacht vacations or catamaran vacations for families.
Yeah.
And we'll bring up their site.
Should we just pop a link to it actually in the chat here, just in case anyone
That's a great idea.
wants to see it?
It's Yacht ICO. So Stefan and his other founders have a great site around kind of affluent folks who are looking to rent or just have a vacation on a catamaran or a yacht in general. So we will pull up their site just real quick, and from there we will start to review it. So let's see. So here's Yachtiko's site. You can see very first thing that you probably see is kind of that like find a destination, that obvious kind of conversion point. So we took a little bit of a look through their site and took a look at some of their content. And do you want to dive in a little bit? And
let's do it. Please take any feedback that we're giving as constructive.
Yes, it is.
No, I think what we tried to do is figure out like where are the biggest wins that can be gained from a very broad SEO point of view. And I think there's the first thing that jumps out to me when I look at a site like this is I know through doing some work previously in the past, especially in the travel space over the past few years, there's going to be a huge emphasis on having a fair amount of different individual pages that focus on individual locations and different services. And one thing that I kind of see here is you kind of see this individual navigation bar across the site, and it's a little bit hectic, right? Like you haven't really got a whole lot of structure here. In fact, when you bring the site up on mobile, it looks way better, I think, than the desktop side of things. And it's probably indicative of how many more people they get via mobile search. But one of the things that stood out so much to me was the actual architecture of the structure in particular of the URLs across this site. So before I go into that, I just want to like preface this with some information about why I'm going to say what I'm saying. One thing that's incredibly important when you're thinking about being able to build large authority and like topical relevance around a small number or a large number of different types of content, it's incredibly important that you create sections within the site, within the URL structure, and within the internal linking structure that helps Google identify when you're moving, basically when content of the same type is living within a certain area. So that sounds really, really fluffy right now. It's going to make sense in a second. Basically, what we have here is a couple of layers to this website. First of all, you have the different types of services. So you've got sailboat charters, motorboat charters, catamarans charters, yacht charters. Then you've got like a few other things in here, but let's just focus on these for now. There are like core services. Now, alongside the core services, you've got what we would kind of call like a modifier on top of them, and that is based on location. So you can have sailboat charters in Sweden. You can have them in a bunch of different destinations, right? And what you want to do is be able to separate out these different layers. So locations should be separated out ideally into maybe like a subdirectory. So that's like within its own little subfolder within the URL. You want then from there build anything related to that location off of that subdirectory, sorry. So what we've currently got Let me just find the right one here. So you'll see here, this is our yacht charter related to Sweden. We just have everything living off of the first subdirectory, yacht-charters-rentals-Sweden. Then when we go to the next one, which is around motorboat charters Sweden, you've got yacht-charters-rentals-motorboat-Sweden. There's nothing that immediately jumps out that says these two pages are related. And it can also create some issues like on just a reporting point of view, but that's less to the point.
Right.
Now, if I was going to do this, what I would have done instead is, yep, I have spelled Sweden, right? I would start by building, and this may not be that easy to see, but I'll explain. I would have a subdirectory there that's /Sweden/. Off of that subdirectory, I would then have yacht charters, I would have yacht charters, rentals. Then I would have a separate page that would be /Sweden/ motorboat charters. Then I would have like the, I forget some of the other versions, but catamaran charters living off it. And you can imagine, again, you're just changing just this one word. I can't spell. Catamaran charters, rentals.
Right.
What you're then having here is everything living within these like folders. Google can clearly understand what each of these sections of the website are talking about. From an internal linking point of view, you could be linking between a bunch of these things, and it makes it really nice and simple. Also, just from the user's point of view, right? Like this is a lot easier. You can imagine having a /Sweden page that links to all the services related to Sweden. You can then just create a much cleaner user experience.
Yeah.
From there, you can even go one layer up and do like /locations, and you just have like almost like a directory page that links to all the individual location pages. One of the key reasons for doing this is relevancy and distributing authority correctly across the site. This all falls back to this topic cluster that we've been methodology we've been talking about. In this respect, your topic clusters are location specific, and then the individual like pieces of content that live off of that core pillar, which would be the /Sweden page, will be these individual service pages. And then you can even go a layer deeper, right? And it's like answering FAQ questions based off of like individual services within that region. And it makes it a lot easier to like scale up the content production itself.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And for those of you listening, even if you're not necessarily in yacht rentals or charters, or you're in maybe B2B or e-commerce or whatever kind of segment you are in, if you're listening, I think the same kind of advice applies, right? If you offer numerous products or services that apply to different audiences or different types of customers, different prospective buyers that are in different industries, maybe think through like your folder structure here.
100%.
Because if you have a folder structure like this, it can get pretty out of control pretty quickly, and I don't think that's intentional necessarily, but it can be really tough to manage over the longer term.
Yeah, and it can you'll end up finding situations where you'll get a couple of years down the line, and especially as this starts to like develop out even further, where you'll realize when you go to create a new type of content that's related, and I'll give an example that could happen here, that really the structure you've built inhibits you from doing that. So let's imagine in this level, we want to go one layer deeper, right? So we've got yacht charter in Sweden, but maybe we then want to go down on the city level.
Right.
So, okay, maybe we want to do Stockholm yacht charter, right? What page do we create now? In this current structure, it'd be like, okay, so /yacht-charters-rentals-Sweden-Stockholm, right? And then it starts getting insane in the URL level. And whereas what you can do with these individual subdirectories is you just add another subdirectory on top of the country levels, you know, /Sweden/Stockholm, and then you can have individual services that keep the exact same URL structures, building patterns of consistency through the site that work perfectly at scale. And like this stuff is a lot easier to do from day one, but it is fixable as well. This is all like focused around risk reward. This would be a big job to change all of this, but I'd be thinking here, like if we do update and rework a lot of the structure of this site, long term, what are the gains we could get from this, and what does it enable us to do a lot more efficiently moving forward? That would be my core focus here, especially with such a localized skew.
Okay, that makes a ton of sense. And a lot of that is based off search volume too, right? How many people are searching for potentially like yacht charters in Sweden?
Right, exactly. And you can basically take the whole sphere of the topic around this and pull together all the different search demand for all the different phrases and keywords and questions that are happening within that topic to make your decision on how much potential you think there is to absorb more search traffic in that sense.
Perfect. Anything else that you think Yatico could benefit from?
Yeah, I think we should probably wrap up, but there's like a couple of tiny things I would just say that relate to some more technical stuff. One thing that they've done is, so we see here you have the English and the German versions of the site, and they live on different URLs. What I would say here is, if they haven't already, is make sure that they've set up the targeting within Google Search Console so that they're saying to Google, only ads pages with /de/ to .de version of Google. And then the other final thing was they've set up hreflang on their website, which tells Google which is the alternative version of a web page in a different language, but they haven't set up which is the default country to go to. It's a very quick change, and we can share out a link from Google in the follow-up stuff that talks a little bit about that, but just something that I would add to the list there.
Yeah, and this is important, especially for anyone listening who sells into numerous countries throughout the world. When you think about hreflang tags, essentially what those are intended to do, if you go to google.de or maybe bing.de or really any of these search engines, doesn't really matter which one, that instead of landing on yatico.com, you would land on this kind of German version of the site, or your own respective version of your own site as well. So you're serving that kind of relevant content to that visitor.
100%.
So with that said, let's move on to the next one, which is SixPark. This site was submitted by Hugh, and they are an investment company. So maybe can you walk us through, as you took a look at the site, what you thought from an SEO point of view?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like in particular this site is actually a really good looking site.
Agreed, yeah.
It's got a pretty sexy design. They've got some really nice UI elements on this in some of the forms that they've put together. There's even a really nice, as I scroll through, really nice calculator that's just nice little simple things that are nice elements to have on the site. Now, they're very much focused around robo advice, right? And this is an enormous search topic in general, full of huge competition. You're going up against some of the most competitive search terms there are around, especially within the financial services industry. And with that comes some very particular challenges. A lot of the challenges don't necessarily stem as much around huge content obstacles. I think one thing that you were going to mention shortly, Jeff, is around their blog. But one of the things that I would mention is the importance of authority. You need to have a ton of authority to be able to really rank well within this kind of sphere. Right now, having a little look at the site, running through some of our tools, there was, I think last night I checked, and there was roughly 31 websites that were linking, external websites that were linking to the SixPark website. Now, that is a drop in the ocean against some of the competitors who are probably building more links than that in a single day and have tens of thousands of backlinks. So this is the kind of challenge that they're up against. And what my primary focus at this stage would be is how can we really generate a ton of good quality backlinks that are going to help us build this authority over time. One caveat is definitely going to be, this is very much going to take some time to be able to get in there. Like going after like investment advice and robo-advisor based topics, you'll see when you just Google some of those search terms, like there's some big names in there that you're going up against.
Yeah, this is a true like David versus Goliath type situation here, where SixPark is competing with some of the largest companies, some of the largest financial services companies in the world.
100%. I think one of the big pieces of focus that I would place on is like, okay, how can we create some very linkable assets? Right. So very different to the Yodico site, where they actually have a ton of good links and they've built a substantial amount of authority, and it was more about internal linking structure. With SixPark, what you want to be thinking about is, okay, how can we do some things that could be interesting, that could maybe get picked up in some big trade publications? You're in the financial services sector. There's tons of publications that talk about interesting things. One thing in particular that all of those publications and even news outlets really love is original data. One thing I'm a big fan of, which I mentioned earlier, was this whole like calculator piece on the site. Really, really useful for individual users, but also when you build calculator tools like this as standalone pieces of content, they're the perfect thing that you can share with trade publications that are writing about a specific topic. Let's just take this thing right here on the website homepage, which basically shows you the estimated gains that you would make on an investment of like X amount in dollars over X amount period of time. You're writing an article all focused around like whether it's investing or wealth management advice. You'd want to link to some kind of calculator that is a fit-all kind of thing. One that I would actually really recommend checking out as a guideline, I'm just going to Google this very quickly, is the New York Times. They do fantastic stuff. One of my favorite pieces of content that I've seen in a long while was this piece from the New York Times, which was basically a calculator tool. It was, is it better to rent or buy? And what you add in there is like, okay, add in some variables like what's your home price right now? How long do you plan to stay there in terms of number of years? What are your mortgage details? Like gathering a bunch of stats and then going through, and you'll see you could rent a home for similar less than this per month. Now, the really clever thing about what they're also doing here is they're gathering a ton of data from people all around the world. And then what they were able to do is use this data to then build even more like reports that they would then report on and use again to get coverage in other major publications, linking back to them, getting a ton of backlinks. Right? And you're not the New York Times, but like this is a consistent pattern that you can follow that usually will yield some kind of result. If it's at least valuable to your end users, it can be used as a really cool lead gen play. So I think that's like a super interesting piece. I think you had an observation as well, Jeff, when we were looking at the site here that was kind of a bit more focused around the lack of blog that they had.
Yeah, absolutely. And to Matt's point, I think one of the things here is like you certainly want to build up links and build up that authority. And one of the ways of doing that, as Matt kind of accurately stated, is writing that original content and pulling it in that original data and kind of fusing that into your content. I think a key way of doing that is just starting a blog, starting some of those pillar pages where if you have data, if you have analytics set up, for example, for this calculator, look at what people are investing, what lump sum people are investing, and contrast that up against a lot of the news articles today are saying younger generations aren't really saving very much.
Right.
So there's one idea in and of itself is like how much are people really saving, and potentially break that up by region even, or just other kind of ways of looking at that data that could be really compelling. I think a blog could be a really good way of doing that. It could naturally help people just link back to your site as well.
Yeah, I think adding a geographic bias is something that, so in my previous time to HubSpot, one of the things that I focused a lot on was building content campaigns that were focused heavily around generating big links from getting picked up in publications, and having a bias where on one side triggers an emotion from a reader that makes them very, very happy, and on one side triggers an emotion that is very, very unhappy, right? Like pairing off two rival cities or countries against each other through a data-backed study is like the playbook for getting picked up in local news outlets. And having good, strong data. One project actually that I remember working on was a website that was in a similar position to Six Park. Relatively new website, real lack of authority in a hyper competitive niche. It was a DIY app builder product. And what we did was, around the time of Pokemon Go just about to launch, we pulled a bunch of data from the App Store. We gathered like some revenue data from some of their figures that they'd released. And we created a piece of content that when you went through to it, started a real-time counter of how much revenue the Pokemon Go team were making during the time on your page. And you could also see live downloads of the app and a few other bits of data. In like 6 days, it had 100,000 views, got picked up in the Next Web, in VentureBeat, a bunch of other big publications, and pretty much like skyrocketed the keyword rankings across the entire website because of this influx of authority. So kind of just to wrap up this piece, this website, I think the whole focus right now, you've nailed down the user experience, the aesthetic is great. It's all about how do we drive more authority into this website.
Right. Yeah, totally agree. And one thing real quick before we move on to our last site is, on average, like how long would you say it takes to build some of that authority, right? This isn't a short-term play, and you may not be able to start getting tens of thousands of links within the next few months necessarily, but how long will it take them to maybe build up some of that authority and some of that link profile?
It's a very good question. It's like, how valuable will Bitcoin be in a few years' time, right? It's like holding on and waiting. But honestly, I think the thing that you want to take with link building is, do not expect just to have immediate solutions here. This is all about building credibility. You approach this in the same way as if you were to say, how do I build credibility as a business? How do I build a reputation within a certain industry so that I can become a thought leader? You don't just kind of like go viral and all of a sudden you're a thought leader overnight.
Right.
I mean, unfortunately, sometimes that does happen, and it's a terrible outcome for people often listening to that person. But the thing that I would say to ground a lot of this is, whenever I read articles that talk about like successes with link building and how like people went viral, things like that, those articles that talk about that success are outliers. Like they are 1 in 1,000, maybe more. Like I would say 90% of the campaigns that I've ran historically have failed, right? And like what you're focused on with big content campaigns like this is those 10% of wins negate all of the losses and can generate way more wins long term. And like you mentioned, Jeff, like building up a blog, publishing consistent amounts of content that will go out is like building up this underlying level of like topical relevance to a specific set of key topics, and you're firing more authority in there. I always try to think long term, and when I say long term, let's use the example of Six Park. They're not going to all of a sudden be as authoritative as some of the major financial services players within 3 months, right? Like this is like a year plan to start being able to get to the level of competing.
Totally agree.
And that's the way I would start thinking about this.
Perfect. Yeah. Best time to start is now. And start hoping for those 10% of wins.
100%.
Awesome. So let's move on to the last site we have, which was submitted by Amanda and is TravelSafe. So TravelSafe is travel agents and for travel insurance as well. Matt, I know you looked through the site and had some feedback. Would just love to hear what you think from an SEO perspective.
Yeah, similar situation in terms of competitiveness. Travel insurance is a horrendously competitive niche. I've done some work in this space in the past, going back a few years now, but know the travel industry particularly well. And this site is actually a perfect blend between the two sites that we've just looked at. So we had the Yodico site that was really, we need to figure out the architecture piece, and authority wasn't too much of a problem. Then we had the previous site, which is Six Park, which was on the tip of my tongue, of course, which was much more geared towards driving authority, and the architecture itself and the general user experience was really strong. TravelSafe is one of those where actually they have a pretty good base level of authority. They have like links from over 1,000 websites.
That's great.
And that seems a lot, but then bear in mind who you're competing with. Like, who else sells travel insurance, right? So they're in the hundreds of thousands of links. But they are actually making they have some visibility for a lot of the topics they're going after. I think there's a couple of things here. So first of all, and I'm not going to dwell too deep on this, but there is still some work to do on the authority building side of things. One of the things I would say, which is a go-to within the travel industry in particular, is really focusing on like influencer marketing. Travel bloggers are like a staple part of link building within the travel industry. And one thing that can work pretty well in the past is like running competitions, giveaways, and initiatives with travel bloggers. Like, for example, one random thing I wrote down, and this was late at night, so forgive me if this is a terrible idea. So like you could run something along the lines of pulling together and basically giving away a free holiday, right, to the person that puts together a story that they publish on their blog that talks about the time when they most needed travel insurance. Right? So that may sound boring right now, but then when you actually think about that, why do you need travel insurance? Oftentimes, it's very much focused around you've either done something stupid while you're on holiday.
Right.
There's often a story behind that can trigger some kind of emotion, most likely from the person that needs to use their travel insurance.
Exactly.
I know personally I've had some of those in the past, but being able to get them to put together stories that obviously then mention the competition, bringing back some links, driving social engagement, potentially even generating a bunch of traffic through to the TravelSafe website, getting a bunch of people on board and giving away a free holiday to the best one, right? Simple stuff like that can really scale up the link building side of things, if you want to call it that, PR if you want to be more sensitive, and just being able to figure out how you can leverage the community. So there's one piece, and then I would actually echo a lot of the stuff we just talked about on the previous website as well from an authority building point of view as well. The second piece does focus a bit more on the side of things related to architecture and also content creation. So one thing when we're looking at some of the big terms like travel insurance, let me just reload this tab. So super competitive topic to be going after. Yeah. And you'll see there's like a million ads that Google have decided to show. We've got people also search for, triggering a knowledge graph box. Alongside this, we've obviously got tons and tons of competitive companies, but also as we go down here, we've got these people also ask boxes. These people also ask boxes are absolute gold when you're thinking about how do I almost think about creating content that solves these individual problems that we talked about near the start of the webinar. Now, this for me is how you start going and developing almost like FAQ level content. One of the first things I do here is just like start opening a few of these so it triggers a load to happen, and more of these load up. You'll see it pretty much like loads up a ton more. Right there, here, we've got a content calendar that's just generated for us, all thanks to Google. And when you're creating content specifically just to answer some of these individual questions, one of my first things I would do here is, okay, right, let's have a little look what's actually ranking in there right now. Click through to this, have a little look at what they're doing. If they're ranking within these sections, they're obviously doing something right. You don't need to reinvent the wheel with SEO. Follow a consistent pattern, and you'll even see here actually the site that's ranking has got travel insurance FAQs as a sub directory there. They're building out a ton of FAQ based content. Similarly to these like boxes here that people also ask, usually, we do. Usually we'll have some of these sections down here that's like searches related. This can help you build out even more paths to start exploring. one thing that's a general guide, and I think this makes it now 7 ads showing on page 1. That is the telltale sign that you're in a competitive industry. So I think that's like the other piece, and they've started doing some of this here, but they've added it all onto one single page. I would kind of have this page still, but I would also break down the FAQs. That there's also a few things here that I would say from a user experience point of view that maybe could have some improvement. It's kind of like this section seems like there's just been a fire hose of content that's been splattered on one page. Break this down into more manageable chunks. Decide whether maybe you want to create some of these sections to be individual articles. And similarly, my kind of last point on this really is on some of these really important pages that they've got. These are like the money pages, right? Where people are going to come through and convert. We've got some pages like this, which is one of our most important pages, don't have a whole lot of content on them. How could we really build out a bit more content into these pages? I would maybe even be thinking, could we build in some of these type calculator type stuff into what we've got in content to make them a bit more friendly on the user, make them a little bit more linkable, but also create consistency across the site where we've got enough content building relevance to the topics that we're trying to rank for.
Exactly. Yeah. If you think through these pages, these are the pages you want people to link to from external sites into these ones. And in order to do that, you need to have a lot of helpful and kind of authoritative content that provides some unique value.
100%. Okay.
Awesome. So with that said, we are happy to answer any questions that you have. And if you're interested potentially in a assessment similar to the one Matt and I went through today for Yatico 6-pack and also Travel Safe, feel free to reach out and we will send you an email, and you can get a very similar assessment for your own website and see how maybe your own SEO strategy or your own content strategy can really be adapted to function in this new landscape of SEO.
If only there was a tool that
if only
did it.
If only. And that is I'm glad you brought that up. That is one thing. So with the new HubSpot content strategy tool, I recommend checking that out as well. It's a tool that can really help surface a lot of this topic-based content to you. And really recommends not only topics of content that you should create, but also like subtopics that we talked about as well, and really helps you with a lot of that interlinking. So it can really help you navigate a lot of that site structure piece that we talked so much about in today's webinar. Yeah,
we basically took all of our marketing team and pulled their brains and put them into a tool, right?
Exactly. We put our superstar brain like into this tool, and now we're giving it to everyone as well. All right, so we are out of time for now. Thank you so much for everyone who attended the webinar. We appreciate it. Again, if you do want an assessment, stay tuned for that email, and we hope to talk to you again soon.
See you later, everyone.
See ya.
Bye.